What did you think of the press conference? What do you think of Steenhuisen's posturing?
I think he has actually done well. As a leader elected less than an hour ago, he had to stamp his authority and also provide the direction that the Democratic Alliance is supposed to take under his leadership. And also to emphasize that the Democratic Alliance is a liberal party, and in its attempt to achieve its objectives, the Democratic Alliance would love to have everybody coming on board. And the emphasis is on the rights and also emphasizing the issue of inequality and redress. And for me, it's important for the leadership of the Democratic Alliance to say certain things were not done properly, and it is being blamed to some within the DA. And as the DA coming out now to say, we have to deal with the issues of redress. The question of whether it is a genuine factor or not is something else. But that is what to expect from a leader of an opposition party. And I think we're going to see something quite different from how Maimane has been handling his leadership role in parliament and as a leader of the party. And obviously, he will have to avoid certain mistakes that were done by Maimane, and he must actually ensure that he builds on what Maimane has actually done in the Democratic Alliance.
Levy, just hold on a minute. We're just going to bring in another analyst. We're also joined via Skype by political analyst Ongama Mtimka. Ongama, thank you for joining us and welcome to our program. What did you think of the DA press conference that we've just witnessed just now?
Good afternoon, Mahendra and Levy there, and your viewers. So the DA is attempting to make a 180-degree turn in order to secure the interests and protect that feels alienated in South Africa. I think they must have a strategy. And then the second thing, I listened to him fumbling about the response to the race question. They must be bold enough to craft a message for the transition period leading up to their policy conference next year. They mustn't fall into the temptation of fumbling about this question because they don't make sense. One moment, Steenhuisen says, when we acknowledge race plays a role, but we're coming from a period in which race-based policies kind of sidetracked us. We want now to still continue with targeted policy. And he found something about the majority of people who are poor happen to be black. You don't happen to be black if you are poor. It's an outcome of a systemic, of a system whose core was to impoverish black people so that you could create them as an army of cheap labor in the country. And this was done over almost 3 millennia. So they must give themselves time to think about this properly. So one of the things, for example, in the flawed thinking they have about redress policy is the assumption that you can have policies that are targeted at addressing the poor without those policies necessarily, talking to the general well-being of black people. What they are forgetting is that the ANC currently has got a suite of policies that in fact respond both to the question of the poor, but also attempts to make transformations at the level of wealth ownership and changing the higher echelons of the management and leadership of companies. And had they not been doing it that way, they would be failing at what was the basic approach of apartheid, which was keep black people poor, but also ensure that the middle class is exclusively white and the wealth. So if you're going to have a policy that's just targeted at poverty and you're not doing anything about wealth ownership or changing the demographics of those who are in senior management, you're never going to succeed in South Africa. And in fact, you're never going to do justice. So their opposing of race-based policies, in my view, is precisely because And for me, they form part of what threatens white interests in South Africa. And I think that we can engage on the question of nationhood without actually making less demands on race-based inclusion. Otherwise, I mean, what do they think? It would be interesting how they explain the concept of black tax, for example. How the wealthy, whom they say should not be policies, the wealthy blacks or their middle class counterparts, how they send money to sustain families that are surviving on pensions, and how they explain that in their own terms, because those people, unlike the relatively poor white, don't have properties to leverage.
Yeah. Ongama, a quick question to you. How real are the fears from voters that Steenhuisen is more likely to take the party back to a position that protects the rights of the white minority?
It's bigger than Steenhuisen. That's what the party has decided. So the coming back of Helen Zille, the election of Steenhuisen, that's part of a broader party strategy. That's something they can never be open about. But this is what they've decided, that you have to have a political vehicle that secures and protects the interests of white people in the country.
He also spoke about restructuring of the party. What do you make of that?
Well, for me, I couldn't get what the details of it are. But the DA, if you remember, when it was still a small party that represented minority interests, which it consolidated in 2004, it had approach to leadership which you could negotiate leadership transitions. Okay, but during this period which they criticized, the party grew and became sort of a mass-based party. How they make those transitions, it's going to be very interesting. In fact, it will be interesting how the masses of the party respond even to this process, which is elite-driven. Will they accept that this is the right direction, or will they attempt at the policy as well as the elective conference to reverse this elite-driven process? It remains to be seen.
Ongama, I'm going to ask the same question to Levy. Levy, what do you make of this notion of restructuring of the party? How will he do it?
The Democratic Alliance is in a forced restructuring. The resignation of senior members of the Democratic Alliance has forced the party to go through restructuring. But restructuring for what? Is it in the best interest of the Democratic Alliance? Is it in the best interest of politics in South Africa? What is it that the Democratic Alliance stand to benefit if we talk about a restructuring of the Democratic Alliance? Views that are being expressed by journalists at the press conference, they talk about the posture that you seem to be taking the Democratic Alliance back to its original roots. And Steenhuisen himself says, indeed, race matters, because if you need to have a stronger or a viable Democratic Alliance or a viable opposition, you need to have the black voters. And the perceptions that are there in the Democratic Alliance now, or in the general public, is that the Democratic Alliance is actually going back to its own roots. It has demonstrated that it does not trust black leadership. And that is why also, when the black leader came in, they actually backtracked in terms of support. And some would argue that maybe it wasn't a very good strategy, but also at the same time, the pressure that was exerted by people outside the Democratic Alliance when they said, bring in a black leader, because you claim to be a party for all people, bring in a black leader. And now the Democratic Alliance is saying, maybe we should have made a mistake by bringing in a black leader. And that's why now Helen Zille has to come back to save the party. Steenhuisen has to come back and lead the party. And out there, obviously, people will be saying they're actually going back to their roots because they do not trust the leadership of a black individual.
And I'm glad you brought in Helen Zille there, because what do we understand about the relationship between Helen Zille and John Steenhuisen?
They've had a good relationship for a very, very long time. Steenhuisen and Helen Zille have been working together very, very well for a very, very long time. Remember, Steenhuisen started as a council in the Democratic Alliance, and he grew within the ranks of the Democratic Alliance. And also there's a perception out there that says that he's an anointed one by Helen Zille. So we're going to see a team of people that have been brought back to lead the Democratic Alliance because the previous team or the previous leader could not actually perform well.
Yes. So how much of an influence do you think Zille had in his appointment?
Steenhuisen has been following Helen Zille. Helen Zille has been leading the Democratic Alliance for a very, very long time. She needs people who support her. She will need people who understand her. And remember, Helen Zille is the one who's going to be calling the shots from head office. And consultation by those that are deployed in other positions in the Democratic Alliance is very much crucial. Those that are in head office, given the responsibility to run the party, especially Helen Zille, will be giving directions to all those that are deployed in different government departments.
Let's go back to Ongama. Ongama, what do you understand about Steenhuisen's ideology, his own personal ideology? Is he pushing the DA ideology as it stands, or does he have ideas of his own that may influence the overall ideology of the DA as a party?
I think he does have strong ideas of his own. I think he does he really genuinely wishes that South Africa was more open on the race question. But what I appreciate about his disposition is the seeming preparedness and openness to engagement and persuasion. And I think that what is going to help him is once the party has clarified its position and its policy content, it may just help him to just find just the right voice to be able to at least sustain the party. Whether or not the Democratic Alliance succeeds as a party, the same way that I felt about Mmusi, is going to speak a lot more about the DA and its position and the electoral market, more than it is about the leaders themselves. I think the structure of leadership in the DA is such that it's leveraged leadership. With the personal contributions of a leader, sometimes I think we stretch it too much without understanding the context and the situation in which leadership rises and falls within the Democratic Alliance. The times of the grand, and bold leader like Tony Leon and Helen Zille, you're not going to have, because you are the leaders that come now come in at a time when their path is already been defined and is contested by forces that are bigger than themselves. Whereas those leaders, those two leaders in particular, had the opportunity to define the party in terms of what it would be. So my view is that his leadership is as much about the collective as the party's identity as it will be about his own potential.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Ongama, and thank you very much indeed, Levy Ndou. Those were political analysts, Ongama Mtimka and Levy Ndou. Thank you very much.